Hey, what's going on, Steeler Nation? This is Big B, Brian Hanley, and welcome back to Steelers Almighty, man. We have got a good show today. Big show for you guys today, man. Appreciate you guys tuning in. First up, what we got is, what did we learn from Minicamp? You know, what are some of the storylines coming out of Minicamp? Again, it's a little bit different than what OTAs actually are. This is more of a real practice, even though it's without pads. So got to see a little bit more. So what did we find out there? Second thing is, you know, is there really a QB battle? You know, is that something that we really want to have go on? One of the things about that, we've got a QB guru, Chris James, coming in to discuss some of that with us on if there is an actual battle between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. The next thing up, do the Steelers spend enough money on offense? That's been a conversation piece over the last several years. Are the Steelers doing enough? Are they spending enough on the offensive side of the ball? And then lastly, how can Minkah Fitzpatrick, how does he get back to being Minkah Fitzpatrick? I think that's a question or a statement of desire for a lot of Steeler fans out there, because we saw too much of Minkah doing things last year that he doesn't need to be doing. So how is Minkah going to get back to that? We'll discuss all that and more. So appreciate you guys tuning in. Look, you can find Steelers Almighty, man, every week on YouTube on Wednesdays at youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. Again, you can also find anywhere that you have social media, you can find Steelers Almighty there. And anywhere that you get a podcast, Steelers Almighty will be there. So make sure you tune in, follow, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff, man. So let's get into the show. So first thing off, what did we learn from Minicamp? So one person stood out to me the most. Now, there was a lot of different aspects, but the person that stood out to me the most, it was Nate Herbig. I think he looked like a monster out there. He looked like somebody that's going to command more snaps on Sunday. Now, the first thing that you're going to say is, come on, Big B, what are you talking about? Was he going to take TJ Watt off the field? Is he going to take Alex Highsmith off the field? I'm not necessarily saying that, but what I am saying, I think he's going to command more snaps, and they're going to find ways to get him on the field with those guys in nickel packages and dime packages and all these pass rushing situations. You can never have enough pass rushers on the field. You could slide TJ Watt inside to a 3 technique and let him rush from there and get Nate Herbig, or vice versa, or whatever you need to do. I just think Nate Herbig, he looked big. He looked strong. He looked aggressive. He just looked like somebody that is going to command more snaps. And that's all good news for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because look, TJ Watt's been hurt. He's gotten hurt. And I shouldn't say the less snaps that he gets, but the more opportunities that he can be fresh out there. And when I say fresh, if you can sub him out and you bring in a guy like Nate Herbig, and he can still be productive, there's going to be a drop-off. Let's not kid ourselves on who TJ Watt is. But if you can sub him in and Nate Herbig can still be a productive football player, that's what he looks like. He looks like he is just dove headfirst into the offseason and just said, hey, look, I know who I'm playing behind, but also know who I play for, and I'm going out here to make some football plays whenever I get my opportunity. That's all good news for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think a lot of fans, a lot of people out there have high expectations for the Pittsburgh Steelers defense this season, and Nate Herbig is going to be a part of that. How big, we don't know, but I definitely think he's going to have a much bigger role than what he had last year. Next person up, as far as who impressed, Calvin Austin III, people. Look, I don't think there's any question that if the season were to start today, Calvin Austin III would be that second wide receiver. Now, don't get me wrong. That doesn't mean that the Steelers aren't going to still try to go out there and acquire a number 2 receiver. Doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean that the Steelers brass probably doesn't want for Roman Wilson to be that number 2 receiver. But as of right now, it would be Calvin Austin III. And by the looks at minicamp, OTAs, he's kind of earned it. He's out there making plays. He's making plays against number 1 wide or defensive backs. He's getting open. He looks fresh. Now, I've said this a million times, and I'll say it again. OTAs and minicamp are in shorts, people. No pads. Pads make a difference, okay? When you put those things on and there's live action coming at you, that matters. But as of now, and the way that he looks, it looks like he has taken that next step to be wide receiver number 2 for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year. There's a lot of different things that he did last year. Look, it could have been some of the offense. You know, we love that Matt Canada offense, didn't we? So some of it could have been that. He didn't have a lot of plays going over the middle. Everything was outside or on a jet sweep. It's almost like when he came into the game, you knew something of that nature was coming. And I just think there's going to be a lot more imagination that is involved with Calvin Austin III. Again, is he the greatest number 2 receiver that we've seen? Probably not. Is there a lot to be desired when the pads come on? Maybe. But as of right now, he's playing good football. And again, if the season were to start today, Calvin Austin III would be your Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver number 2. And I think he's kind of earned that at this point. So again, that doesn't mean that they're not going to go out there and try to get another receiver. It doesn't mean that at all. And we'll get into a little bit of that later. But I like what I see out of Calvin Austin III right now. Lastly is George Pickens. He looks like an absolute superstar. It looks like he has taken the offseason and said, you know what? It's time for me to turn this up a notch. He was already pretty damn good. It looks like that George Pickens has just said, you know what? I'm going to be one of the best receivers in the National Football League. They're talking about this person. They talk about that person. Now that maybe I don't have the restraints of being in such a pathetic offense, an offensive scheme, now those restraints are going to be lifted, and I'm going to be ready to roll. It looks like George Pickens is taking it seriously. Clearly, he is the most dominant receiver on the football field. He's just taking it to the defense when his number has been called. I like what George Pickens brings to the table. It's time for him to be a star. I do have a question for you guys. Again, one of those great poll questions. Do you think that George Pickens makes the jump to superstardom this season? Do you think that this is the year that George Pickens makes the jump to superstardom? Make sure you leave your answers in the comments. Personally, yeah, I think the answer is yes. Just the way that he looks, the way that he's taking this seriously. Look, we all know that the star power is there. He had some route running issues that we talked about before that seemed to be more scheme related, because later on in the season, when there was a little bit more of imagination on offense, he seemed to be running different routes, which is a good thing. It lets me know that he's been working on running the route tree. OTAs and minicamp, he showed that he's really been working on it, doing a lot of different things out on the football field. So I just believe that George Pickens is ready to actually explode. It's never been a matter of the talent. It's always been the maturity. And it seems like, again, not in pads, not during the season, but it seems like the maturity has raised to the level of his ability. And if that's the case, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers may have found their next superstar wide receiver. Let's move on here. So the one thing about the QB battle, or talking about the QB battle, is it actually a quarterback battle? I guess is the basic thing. Is it really a battle, between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? We're going to take a deep dive into that. We've got our quarterback guru here, CJ Chris James. We're going to bring him in, and we're going to discuss whether this is an actual quarterback battle. Let's bring in CJ now. So coming up next here, we're talking about the quarterbacks. Is there an actual quarterback battle? Today we have got our quarterback guru, CJ Chris James. Chris, he is a senior analyst at Football Game Plan. He's also with fantasy football analyst on Picks 11 in New York City, host of Chopping It Up with CJ, the CJ's podcast, and also he is Football Writers of America Association member. CJ, how are you doing, my man?
Doing all right, Big B. Good.
All right.
I'm glad to be on.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. So, this Steelers quarterback battle, I guess my first question to you is, CJ, is this thing really a quarterback battle between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields?
I think that it's a succession plan. I think that the obvious choice to start week one to make sure that everyone's comfortable is Russell Wilson. I mean, what happened to him in Denver was his fault, but also he got a raw deal. There's a level of gravitas to him. I mean, he's a Super Bowl winning quarterback who his numbers, if you just look at him from a 10,000 foot level, they're Hall of Fame worthy. So what happened the last couple of years may have left a bad taste in some's mouth, but I think he had more touchdown passes last year than the Steelers have had in the last 2 years combined. So I think he's good to go on that front.
Yeah, I've been saying that to a lot of people, CJ, is that, look, I know Russell Wilson might not be everybody's cup of tea, but he is absolutely better than what the Steelers have had the last 2 years. So let's make no mistake about that. Having said that, with this Arthur Smith offense, is Justin Fields actually a better fit for what the Steelers are trying to do on offense?
I think he's eventually a better fit. What they want to do is something that should be done for all quarterbacks. Some get it earlier than late. Hopefully he gets it here. They're going to instill confidence into him. They don't want to just put him out there because he's clearly the better athlete with more upside.
Right.
But he's got to get that confidence back. That guy had a swagger to him, 40 touchdowns, 1 interception at Ohio State in the season before the pandemic year. And once he actually develops into that, he can hit all areas of the field. Huge arm, and we know what he can do with his legs if that's called on.
Gotcha. My thing about Fields, and it's kind of what you said, look, is they didn't have a ton of weapons at Chicago for him to work with. I think the offensive line, don't get me wrong, their offensive line was bad, but I think it was a little bit better. They just didn't utilize it the way that I think that they're going to utilize it now. Plus, they have a lot more weapons. I think Fields can be good, but here's another thing, CJ, and this is just kind of a different question here. But as far as quarterbacks go, they don't let guys develop, sit and watch for a year. Do you think that was something that Justin Fields needed? And do you think that's a good thing for him to do now?
Sure. So if you need a guy to do exactly what you want him to do, AKA be kind of a robot, and some quarterbacks do work well in that situation, sitting for a year is ideal. I think for most players, playing is ideal. So you have to have a coaching staff that's willing to do what the strengths are of that young man, which did happen in Chicago, and then build off of that to what you want as your full complement. So I know that people want to see some of the old school stuff, but with the NFL going so simple in a lot of ways at the quarterback position, they can play immediately, but you just have to foster in what they do well instead of trying to have too much hubris and force your agenda on them.
Yeah, that's kind of my thinking as well. With Russell Wilson here in this Arthur Smith offense, they throw the ball over the middle a lot. That's one of the things that we've seen Russell Wilson maybe struggle or just not do altogether. Are those concerns real? And if they are real, can they be fixed?
Sure. So I think they're real in another schemed offense. If you have Russell Wilson sitting in the pocket and trying to throw across the middle, cancel Christmas. It's not happening.
Right.
But I think Arthur Smith, if he does the job that I know he's capable of doing, he'll get him on the move with intermediate throws. Russell Wilson can throw that pass, no problem. He threw it back at Wisconsin. He threw it in Seattle. It was the sitting in the pocket and having to be stationary and make those throws. He was way more comfortable throwing outside the numbers. This is a movement-based offense. They're going to get him in a space and spots that allow him to utilize his athleticism and make 3 levels of throws, and he can do that.
Right. Well, the one thing is a lot of play action. The Steelers, the imagination we could go all day talking about Matt Canada's offense, lack of imagination, but I feel like there's going to be a lot more of that. And again, play action, throwing the ball down the field, which is something that Russell Wilson absolutely does well. And this offense, that's going to be something that's called upon. So I think that's an advantage. And again, whether you want to say over the middle, down the field, I don't think they're necessarily the same thing. But I think there's going to be a lot more that, turning around, putting the ball in a running back's hands, taking it out and getting the ball down the field, whether it's over the middle or not. I think Russell Wilson excels in that. And I think that's what this offense, CJ, is going to see a lot of this year.
Yeah. Russell Wilson's game reminds me of the 5 or 6 year ban of the analytics in the NBA, where it was all 3-pointers and layups.
Right.
Well, that's all Russell Wilson wanted to do, deep shots and short ones. Doesn't mean he can't. Just like those guys, it's not that they can't hit a 16-footer. So if you allow him to work that into his game with some natural ability to it, he'll be able to do it just fine.
Right. And that's kind of what I think a Russell Wilson offense is going to look like at this point. Is he's going to have those short, intermediate passes, but also, over the middle, but the deep shots as well. I think it just what you said, all 3 levels of the field, I think Russell Wilson is going to take advantage of, because it's not that a lack of an arm is something that we have to worry about with Russell Wilson. That's not the case. It's more of, what does the offense call for? And I don't think it called for a lot of that stuff that we say that he struggled with or just didn't do as far as throwing the ball over the middle. I think he's going to do that. I think the Steelers have weapons that are going to be able to do that. You look at some of the tight ends. I'm not saying that Seattle and Denver didn't have good tight ends. I just believe the Steelers have better ones, Pat Freiermuth, and I think Darnell Washington is going to have a much bigger role in the offense than he did a year ago. And throwing the ball to him, whether it's in the red zone or not, I think Russell Wilson or Justin Fields is going to love doing that.
Absolutely. Plus, they had, I think he was taken in the 3rd round, tied for my number 6 wide receiver. I loved Roman Wilson coming out.
Yeah.
He's going to do a great job in that offense.
Yes, absolutely. So let's just say that Russell Wilson, because for all intents and purposes, he's going to be the starter. Unless something, a catastrophe happens, it's going to be Russell Wilson as the starter. At least that's all indications at this point.
Correct.
Does Justin Fields get a package to get on the field? And if so, what's it look like?
I think they do. And first and foremost, I think what they're going to do is try to fool you. What do I mean? They're going to use it kind of like the Derrick Henry package. And I hate saying it like this because sometimes it gets conflated with athletic quarterbacks being running backs.
Right.
It's the lining him up in what kind of looks like a single wing, except surprise, surprise, dude can throw the ball. He's a quarterback. Right. That's going to be the initial, but they'll also start to mix him in as the season goes along, not to steal the job this year. I think for the full season, this is Russell Wilson's job, unless he plays poorly, but it'll be, you never know what's going to happen. I think 55 or 60 different quarterbacks started games last year.
Right.
So the most in modern NFL history. So they want to make sure that everyone's good to go and on the same page, especially for that late push, because that tail schedule is terrible.
Yeah. And that's the thing, I've had a lot of questions and people asking me, well, why don't they just run a 2-quarterback system? I'm like, hold on a second. That doesn't work. You don't need a 2-quarterback system. Nobody ever gets into a rhythm. And if somebody happens to get into a rhythm, all of a sudden you're going to take them out just for the purpose of taking them out of a football game to get somebody else reps. Yeah, that's not going to work. Not at this level. You might be able to get away with that at college. You can't get away with that in the National Football League. So a 2-quarterback system, I don't think that works. I think short yardage, goal line package, something of that nature. I like Fields getting on the field then, but even in that case, I still, you can't just take Russell Wilson off every time it gets to be 3rd and 1 or it's 4th and 1 or on the goal line. You can't just say we're going to take Russell Wilson out of the game. You can't do that. So to me, I think that the getting Justin Fields on the field and getting him snaps are going to be few and far between, especially if Russell Wilson is playing well, CJ. I think it's going to be tough.
No, it will be. I feel like it's going to be more utilized in the vein of what the Saints were doing when they would bring Taysom Hill in to replace Drew Brees. At no point did anyone with any sense think Taysom Hill's going to take over for Drew Brees. But what it was is some of that was due to his physical limitations, but it'll be more of a mix and match just to keep people on their toes. And to your point earlier, the reason it works in college is twofold. Sometimes skill sets differ, but in college, and you can speak more to this, do you know how difficult it is to get communication from 2 different people, 2 different styles, 2 different cadences, and also getting the play in college, signs and all sorts of stuff everyone knows. This is the NFL. It is different. It cannot work very well, folks.
No, not at all. Not at all. Here's $1 million question and last question before I get you out of here is, if Russell Wilson wins the job and he plays well, who's the quarterback next year and what does that all look like?
The $1 million question is answered in the following way. I feel like for 2025's season, right? The only way that Russell Wilson is the quarterback is if the Steelers make a true push. They have to win a playoff game. They have to look like a unit where he's the future, because what they have in the garage is a Ferrari that they need to learn how to drive first, because they haven't been able to drive at that position for a little bit. But if he just plays good football, I think what they'll do is figure out how to transition him to someplace and get Justin Fields on the field. We saw the difference between, and this is not a knock, it is a bad comp, Alex Smith versus Mahomes. They knew what they had in the garage. And Smith did his job, but they knew that they had a more talented guy back there. Yeah. And it's the same situation here.
Absolutely. And I like that analogy. I know people are going to take it and misconstrue it and say, oh, he's comparing Patrick Mahomes to Justin Fields. No, he didn't. He's just comparing the situation. That's it. And so I totally understand. I like that comparison, actually. Having said all of that, I think you're right. I like the fact that Russell Wilson has to win a playoff game. I've been saying that, and there's some people that are pushing back, but most Steeler fans agree with me and agree with what you said, CJ, is like, look, if you don't win a playoff game, even if we win the division, but we don't win a playoff game, how much have we gained in all of this? How are we different than what we have been previously? We're not any different. So why would we move forward with this aging quarterback if we aren't better than what we have been as a team? Now, granted, there can be circumstances that happen. Context clearly matters. But at the same time, CJ, it's still, truth is truth, is that you cannot say that the Steelers are in a better situation if they still can't win a playoff game. You can't go with that guy moving forward when we can't get past where we're currently at right now. Heck, Kenny Pickett, fine. Okay, we didn't win. Mason Rudolph, fine. Heck, there was a time where Duck Hodges almost got us to the playoffs, and we weren't going to win a playoff game then anyway. So if we're not better, I don't think you can move forward with an aging quarterback. I think you got to give somebody else an opportunity.
Yeah. Caveat would be if they play the Chiefs for some reason in the first round and lose 35-31, and Russell Wilson balled out, but TJ Watt, Minkah Fitzpatrick, Joey Porter Jr., all of them went down.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Context clearly matters. Clearly matters. Because if Russell Wilson throws for 400 yards and they're playing great, but the defense has a problem, well, that's not his fault. I totally understand that. So, but yes, you're exactly right, man. Well, number one, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us. I know we'll have you back more and more, especially as the season gets done. We'll have you back later on to break down some of these quarterbacks within the conference, man. So thank you, CJ, for taking the time out today.
Thanks for having me on again, Big B, and always welcome on.
Appreciate it. All right. Well, thanks, CJ, again for taking the time to come on and just kind of break down a little bit of what's going on with the quarterback situation there. I thought it was important that you guys got a different voice, and CJ's been doing this for a long time, so I appreciate him joining us. Do have a question here. So a nice poll question. Although Mike Tomlin has squashed any QB battle talks, do you want there to be an actual QB battle and let the best quarterback win? That's the question. We know that they've said that it's not there. It's a competition and they're not talking about it. Do we want it to be one? That's a good question. Please leave your answers in the comments, people, because like I said, I've been the person from day one that thought it should be a battle. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a battle, but I want it to actually be one. I want there to be a battle, but make sure you guys leave your answers in the comments section there. So let's move on, man. So for years, the Pittsburgh Steelers have been a team that's lived off their defense. The defense has been the identity. There was a point in time, it was a few years back, where we had the Killer Bees, and the Pittsburgh Steelers offense was amazing. One of the best in the league, if not the best in the league. But then the defense couldn't stop anybody. So they've done the exact opposite and went back to old-time Steeler. Okay, it's going to be about the defense. Well, my question, and right now, is do the Steelers need to start spending more money on offense? I know there's a lot of you out there that are screaming at the screen right now saying, yes, Big B, you absolutely have to. Well, let's take a look at this, man. First off, 10 of the top 15 guys on the Steelers roster the top or not on the Steelers roster, but 10 of the top 15 salaries on the Steelers roster are all guys. So that's the first thing. I mean, heck, there's only 11 defensive players that can start. So you got 10 defensive guys in the top 15. Now let's take it a step further. 3 of those guys are offensive guards of those top 15. That's one thing to keep in mind. 3 of those guys are offensive guards. One of those offensive guards is a backup and doesn't play. Think about that for a second. He's in the top 15 of salaries. Another person is the kicker. Now, don't get me wrong, Boswell is outstanding, but that's who's in your top 15. And then the last guy, it just happens to be Najee Harris, who we're not picking up the 5th year of his contract. So there's that. So again, let me break that down again for you. Of the top 15 salaries the Steelers have, 10 of them are on the defensive side. 3 guys are offensive guards. One of those is a backup offensive guard. That's nuts for me to say that, isn't it? One of the top 15 salaries is an offensive guard that does not play. That's just insane. Another one's a kicker, and another one's a 5th-year option that we did not pick up, who chances are is not going to be with the Steelers next year. At some point, I'm sorry, the Steelers have to start spending money on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, it's just that. They're not paying a quarterback. They're not paying a running back. They're not paying a wide receiver. They're not paying any tight ends. At some point, man, they've just got to make it a point to start spending money on skill positions. Heck, they haven't spent any money on a skill position since Big Ben, since his last extension. Well, yeah, I get that, but I mean, and I know the first thing that people are going to say, well, a lot of the guys are on rookie deals, and no, they're not. No, they're not. Look, the Steelers, they missed on Kenny Pickett. Let's just start there. We missed on Kenny Pickett. And I know there might be some pushback to that. You would be wrong. I'm sorry that we missed on Kenny Pickett, and he's no longer on the team. So we're still not spending any money there. Even if we re-sign Russell Wilson, he's not going to get some crazy $55, $60 million deal that's going to hamstring the salary cap. That's not what's going to happen. Even if it's just that's just not going to happen. Even if it's Justin Fields, I'm sorry, people, that's not what's going to happen here. So let's look at the Steelers' salaries. You know, it's just look at the quarterbacks here: Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Kyle Allen, John Plumlee, a rookie. Look at those salaries. And you think about it for a second in comparison to other teams that we're competing with. Just think of Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson. I mean, you could throw in Deshaun Watson. I think that's kind of the outlier. But look at Burrow and Jackson. $55 million a year. Our starting quarterback, $1.2 million. Even if you want to throw Justin Fields in there, $3.2 million. So that's what we're comparing it to. And look, Daniel Jones making $40 million. Baker Mayfield making $50 million. You know, at some point, the Steelers got to pay. Let's move on. Look at running back. You know, look at the running backs. Najee getting 4.1. We just talked about him, more than likely not going to be on the team. And I know a lot of people say, well, you don't need to pay running backs all that kind of money. Hey, the San Francisco 49ers were just in the Super Bowl. And I know they're not paying a quarterback, and they're not, but they are paying a running back. They are paying 2 wide receivers, and they're also paying a tight end. They're spending money on that side of the football. They also just happen to be paying arguably one of the best left tackles in football. So they're spending money on that side of the field. The Pittsburgh Steelers can do the same thing, but we're just not. We're just not. Look at wide receiver. Think about what the wide receivers are signing for right now. Our highest paid is 1.8. Now, again, I'm a big context matters type of guy. If you guys haven't figured that out by now, George Pickens is going to get another deal. Obviously, it's going to be a big deal. Is it going to be a $30 million deal? I don't know. But he is obviously going to get a big deal. But as of right now, he's not. At 1.8. Van Jefferson, Scotty. I mean, look at that. Look at that. You know, the Steelers have the ability to pay more, you know, and then look at tight end. And tight end is a premium position now. And I know Freiermuth is going to get another deal. He is. I would suspect, is what I should say, Pat Freiermuth gets another deal before the season gets started. I would think that they are working on an extension for him right this very second. So I would suspect that Pat Freiermuth gets a new deal before the season started, especially with the role that, number one, he has on the team, he's going to have on the team in the future. Yeah, I suspect Pat Freiermuth gets a big raise before the season comes to a head here. But as it sits right now, he's not. Again, Steelers got to spend some money on that side of the football, man. It's just time. It's just time. Look, the Steelers have to be, they got to get into this day and age as far as football means. And when I say that, I'm talking about go out and get a free agent. They can go out and get a free agent. And the time is now, man. The time is now to go out and get a free agent with some draft capital. Go out and get a Cortland Sutton. Go out and get a Brandon Ayuk. Use some draft capital. Do you have to spend $30 million on Ayuk? Maybe not. Probably not. Would I do that? No. But maybe he's not asking for that. All this has been allegedly anyway on what he turned down $26 million. We know that Cortland Sutton, it hasn't been allegedly what he's asking for. Not to mention $16.5 million in cap space. We got room. We can create more room. Restructure Cam Hayward's deal. Restructure TJ Watt's deal. Restructure Minkah's deal. We got the ability to do that, people. You know, there's room. At some point, we have just got to put our best foot forward and say, we are going to spend this money on the offensive side of the ball, and it's not going to be on three guards. I mean, just the three guards. Are you kidding me? Oh, gotta spend some money on some skill position players. I think it's coming, but hopefully it gets done sooner than later. I would love for the Steelers to be able to go out and do that. Poll question, no. Big poll question. Are the Steelers currently spending enough money at the skill positions? I think we probably already know the answer to that, but please leave your answers in the comments section. Got to start spending on that side of the ball, man. It's just a necessity. It is just a necessity. So, all right, let's move on here. Minkah Fitzpatrick, whew, bad. It wasn't even a bad year last year. By his standards, you would say it's a bad year, but he missed 7 games out with injury. The question is, how can we get Minkah back to playing like Minkah? Well, first off, health. That would be number one. He missed 7 games, like I just mentioned, hamstring injury and a knee injury. A knee injury at the end of the year. He came back for the playoff game after missing the previous 3 games, but he was compromised. You could tell, he wasn't the same guy. And it is what it is. You can't help injuries. Now, you don't want guys to be injured, but at the same time, it just is what it is. One thing about Minkah, he played out of position a lot last year. So much that it was incredibly noticeable, not only just us common fan, but also to coaching staff and people around the league. Why is Minkah down in the box? Why is he so close to the line of scrimmage? That is not what Minkah Fitzpatrick thrives in. It's not that he can't do it, but that's not his best position on the football field. He is a free safety, roam. He's an outstanding tackler, but you got him down in the box. Well, he's not as good a tackler when he's trying to fend off offensive linemen running at him. He's a sure tackler, number one, but things can be more difficult when you're having to fend off blockers. That's not his thing. Well, the one thing about Minkah, he had to do that last year. Number one, because the Steelers were decimated by injuries at the linebacker position, and because of the limitations of others when they did fill in at the linebacker position. He had to be responsible for more and do things that were out of his comfort zone that makes Minkah Minkah. That's not a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's just not. You need Minkah to be the guy that we know, the free roamer, roaming around the field, making plays, being a ball hawk, coming down in the box every now and then. But he lived in the box last year. Deshaun Elliott is going to help with that a ton. Now, look, the first thing about Deshaun Elliott, he's a strong safety. And I know people are going to say, well, he's been on 3 different teams the last 3 years. I get that. But you look at it, he was productive. It wasn't that, oh, man, he's on this team. He was on Miami last year. Oh, no, he didn't play well. No, he was fine. Oh, man, it just moving around all over the league. Look, safety was one of those positions that people talked about last year that was being devalued and was undervalued. So a strong safety, yeah, they might have to move around a couple of times. It's just the way that it works. But DeShon Elliott, let's not kid ourselves. He's a good football player, and he's a good tackler, and he would be the safety that can play down in the box, in a nickel situation, a dime situation, or God forbid we have hit the injury bug at linebacker like we did last year. This would be the guy that we could put down there. And we don't have to have Minkah down there playing as close to the line of scrimmage because, again, injuries and the limitations of others. So DeShon Elliott is going to help Minkah tremendously in getting him back. Not to mention Mike Tomlin, Terrell Austin, both of them have said, we're getting Minkah back to doing what Minkah does well. His role will be different this year than what you've seen it. And I think that's a good thing for the Pittsburgh Steelers to get Minkah Fitzpatrick back. Look at these top 4 safeties, according to Pro Football Focus. You got Antoine Winfield Jr., Kyle Hamilton, Jesse Bates, and then Minkah at 4th. First of all, it came out and it's based off of last year. So, yeah, that's probably right based off of last year. The reason that I disagree, because I know what Minkah is. If he is able to do and play where he's supposed to be and not have to do things because of injuries and limitations and have to play out of position, he's a top 2 safety in this league. And I think most Pittsburgh Steelers fans would agree. I think most knowledgeable football fans would agree. If you just let Minkah, or if he's allowed to be where he needs to be, where he thrives the best, Minkah Fitzpatrick is a top 2 safety in this league. And I think this is going to be the season, again, health willing, that he's going to show how good he is. We got to get Minkah back to where he is. You got to get him back there. So I love the fact that, number one, Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin have both come out and said that Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to have a different role, a better role for him, and also a better role for this defense. Because I've said it once and I'll say it again. If everything, again, right as it sits right now, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers have a top 3 defense in the National Football League. I really believe that. That's not just fandom talking. You just you break it down by position. I think the Steelers have a top 3 defense, and maybe higher. We'll see what happens, obviously, when the pads get on and when the lights start shining. But I think the Steelers defense can be incredible this year. Minkah Fitzpatrick is going to be a big, big part of that. So in closing, today's NFL, and I thought about this for a second. Today's NFL, the way that the rules are, you've got to have offense. You've got to have a dynamic offense. And I know we talked earlier about the Pittsburgh Steelers spending money on the offensive side of the ball, and I think it's just a must. You can't do it the old, we're going to play great defense, we're going to play good special teams, and we're going to make a couple of plays at the end and try to win playoff games. That doesn't work. We've tried that. We can win games. We can be above 500, but we can't win playoff games that way. You've got to be dynamic. Now, part of that was because we had a horrible offensive system. I don't even want to go into that. That's only going to make me mad. That's only going to make you mad. We don't even need to discuss what the previous 3 years, what that offense looked like. Having said all of that, the Steelers got to start become more dynamic, and I think Arthur Smith is going to have that. I think his imagination, what he likes to do, spreading the ball around, utilizing the stars that the Steelers have, also with the power running game, I think this offense is going to be next level with just better quarterback play altogether. Confident and better quarterback play, I think the Steelers are going to be able to take the next step on offense. I'm not saying they got to be the most high-scoring offense in the league. And when I say dynamic, that also doesn't mean you have to throw the ball 55 times a game. That's not what dynamic means. It just means you have to have an imagination. That's all it means. And imagination could be running the ball with several different schemes all over the place and also incorporating a power running game as well. But again, incorporate that imagination. I believe Arthur Smith has that. He's going to bring that to the table. improved offensive line play, improved quarterback play, Steelers could be looking at a really, really special offense this season. I want to thank all you guys again for coming out and supporting Steelers Almighty. We've been doing this for just over 2 months. We've got a ton of support. I appreciate it. Again, you can find us on YouTube, youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. Anywhere you get a podcast, you will be able to find Steelers Almighty, and it is on all the social media platforms. Remember to like, follow, use the notification bell to know exactly when new episodes are coming out. And always comment, because I always like chit-chatting with you guys in the comments section. We appreciate you. We love you guys. Aloha.